So recently, Kevin Feige, the Grand Poobah guy over at Marvel Studios, made this statement that he thought that Scarlet Witch could have soloed Thanos by herself. And the more when I initially read this article, right, I read it this morning. When I initially read this, I was like, well, that's kind of ridiculous. Like, that's kind of silly. Like, Scarlet Witch can never solo Thanos by herself. But then I started thinking about it. And I was like, no, she actually could, but only under certain circumstances, right? Like Scarlet Witch by herself, under any normal circumstance, probably not. But Scarlet Witch channeling the power of Cthun, definitely. Now, what does this mean? Like, what does it mean when I say Scarlet Witch channeling the power of Cthun, i.e. the House of M version of Scarlet Witch? Okay. And really Secret Empire Scarlet Witch too, because Cthulhu had totally taken over her body at that point. When it comes to the character of Cthulhu, he's what's called an Elder God in Marvel Comics. And the way this played out comes from Thor Annual Number 10 back in 1982, written by a guy named Mark Grunwald. And this was a story that basically detailed the very early origins of Earth in Marvel Comics. Now, why those stories always originated in Thor, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Thor was a series of stories that were based around the nature of gods and the fact that Gaia, who was the sentience of Earth, was his biological mom. I guess they kind of used that to sort of segue from one to the other. Regardless of the circumstance, that's usually how it played out. But what the story told us is that way before the first single-celled organism became the first multi-celled organism, and then we started to see life as we know it today, the Earth was inhabited by like 5 elder gods, and they were created by a being named the Demiurge. Now, the Demiurge was kind of like this sentience of Earth's biosphere, right? I mean, that's really kind of how Marvel describes it, and really just sort of leaves it at that. That's really the only description that we get. But essentially, in the rankings, the hierarchy of elder gods, Demiurge was at the very, very top, kind of the father of them all. And Demiurge produced Set, the being known as Set, who's actually a really, really powerful demon, as well as Gaia, who we talked about a second ago, and then Ashtur, and then Cthulhu. And Cthulhu was this being that basically started like coveting magical energy, right? Becoming basically what was considered like a dark practitioner or a dark practitioner of magic, right? So the Earth's first black magician, more or less, using black magic. And so the result was that he started kind of grabbing power unto himself. Now, over the course of some, 1.5 billion years, basically, all these different elder gods that had kind of grown outside of just the original 4 or 5 that were made by Demiurge, basically started going insane and becoming evil and corrupted by their power. Now, a lot of this was due to the fact that Cthulhu spread his influence around the world, right? And basically started kind of building a dark army under himself. And so what ended up happening is Gaia basically went to the Demiurge and said, give me a son that can defeat all these dark demons. And so the result was that Gaia gave birth to Atum. Atum in turn started traveling around the world and killing all these different elder gods that it came across, and then eventually became Demigorge and then just flew into the sun. I know it's weird, but it's comics, so just go with it. Basically, to make this short, a great big god gave birth to a bunch of little gods who became evil. They were consumed by a newborn god who flew into the sun. That's basically the way this plays out. I know, it's 1980s comics, guys. Nobody said it had to make sense. It just had to work. But the idea behind this is that Cthulhu was one of the elder gods who basically survived, who escaped, and he took off to a different dimension. Now, he did have these kind of anchors to like the main Marvel universe, to Earth, that would kind of allow him to return, not so far in terms of like full power, but like try to make his way back. And the idea was when Magneto's wife Magda had become pregnant with Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, that Cthulhu had sensed the power that Scarlet Witch had, and believed that like she would be a vector by which he would come back one day. And that's ultimately exactly what happened. During the events of House of M, he's never really seized control of her in her totality outside of Secret Empire, which is to say like he full on comes back. It's always done little like bits and pieces of him. But because of the nature of Cthulhu and because of how powerful he is, he channels what's called chaos magic. Now, chaos magic is a debatable concept in Marvel. For the longest time, it was something Marvel kind of teased at, and they were just kind of like, this is why Scarlet Witch can do what she does, because something chaos magic. That and getting lessons from Agatha Harkness, who's an actual witch in Marvel Comics. But getting these little lessons here and there, it was always kind of this thing of there's an untapped power within Scarlet Witch that if she harnesses it, that she'll go crazy and who knows what'll happen after that. And all that really came to a head during the events of Avengers Disassembled and House of M. And the reason why was because these were 2 stories that detailed the Scarlet Witch losing her mind, right? So the idea was that Scarlet Witch and Vision had kids. That it was the belief that they had kids. And Marvel kind of wrote these stories in a really weird, finicky way, and it was Brian Michael Bendis trying to clear everything up. But essentially what Bendis came along and said was that they never actually had kids. Instead, at least I'm pretty sure it was Bendis who wrote Avengers Disassembled. It may not have been. I may have been wrong. I know he wrote House of M. I think he wrote Avengers Disassembled. But regardless, whoever was writing it at the time basically detailed this scenario where it turned out that the Scarlet Witch's kids never existed. And now we kind of knew that before because there was a story that had been created back in the day where it turned out that there were the shards of like the demon Mephisto who was just kind of toying with Scarlet Witch and Vision. But because of that, she believed the Avengers had kidnapped her children and were holding them from her. And so she lost her mind. She ended up using her powers. There is a trash dumpster or a trash truck outside the house, and hopefully you guys can't hear that. But she had used her powers to basically make Tony Stark look drunk in front of the United Nations. That tanked the value of Stark Industries, which in turn took away from his ability to fund the Avengers, so the Avengers disbanded. She basically spawned this gigantic Kree armada above Avengers Mansion. Like, Hawkeye died in the process, and I mean, it was like this huge fleet, right? Like ships and ships and ships and like soldiers all over the place, and it was pandemonium. But all that basically came to a head when Magneto showed up and essentially said, like, you guys have screwed her up, I'm gonna take her to Genosha, which used to be a mutant haven until all 16 million mutants were destroyed, and he basically resided there, and so he took Scarlet Witch with him. Now after that goes into House of M, and you end up learning that Charles Xavier of the X-Men had gone over with Magneto to try to fix the mind of Scarlet Witch and realized that couldn't be done. And so the result was that Charles Xavier called together the Avengers and the X-Men and said, the only real option we have here is to kill her, because with the kind of power she possesses and channeling the power of Cthun, she's going to do something and it's going to screw everything up. She could alter the entire space-time continuum, right? Because like her probability hexes, the ability to kind of bend things to her favor, more or less like the power of luck, was really her manipulating reality on a really, really small scale. And so once they all realized that, they said, well, it's only a matter of time before she distorts reality on a huge scale. And so they said, well, we have to kill her. It's the only way to make it work. And so with Quicksilver overhearing that, he raced to Scarlet Witch and said, they're going to kill you, but you can fix everything. You can make everything okay. Thus, we got the House of M, where she completely and totally warped reality, changed everything up, and the result was that she was, mutants were like the highest class in society. Basically, everybody got their subconscious wishes. Now, eventually, House of M came to a close, and I've got that video series on my channel, so you're welcome to check it out. House of M came to a close, and not even Doctor Strange was able to stop her, right? Like, at the end of the day, she set everything back the way she was supposed to, but she said no more mutants at the very end, and then took away 98% of the mutant powers population. Now, the mutant population's powers, right? And so, because of that, when you look at Scarlet Witch channeling the power of Cthulhu and chaos magic, and then you even go into things following that, like, what is it, the Children's Crusade? You go into things that follow that, and it's kind of like, here's how powerful Scarlet Witch truly is. It really kind of boggles the mind, right? Because the ability to distort reality, to alter it, and then set it back is a power reserved for very few. And there's never really been an instance where we've seen somebody alter reality on that scale. Usually it's somebody using something like the Infinity Gauntlet or like a Cosmic Cube or something along those lines. There have been fights between characters like the Molecule Man and the Beyonder that kind of shook reality to its core. Kind of like literally you could feel the shockwaves of energy emanating throughout the entirety of the multiverse. And that's really where you saw the power of the Scarlet Witch, because what you ended up learning later on down the line is not only did she take away 98% of the mutant population's powers in the main Marvel universe, she did it across the entire multiverse, right? So like the whole multiverse was affected by the power she possessed. And that's why I say that's, with her being able to solo Thanos, that's really the only circumstance she could do it if she was just so grossly overpowered. Because Scarlet Witch is only ever really one or the other. Either she's just a normal hero who can do some things and fly, and manipulate some probability here and there, or she's just like multiversal, godly powerful, imbalancing everything and screwing everything up, right? There really is no in between there when it comes to her character. There is, every once in a while, but for the most part, it's usually one extreme or the other. Now, in recent years, it's just been one extreme. It's been her being, not really at her weakest point, but a little stronger than you would normally expect, but that's basically about it. She hasn't really been House of M level for a long, long time. But again, this is the circumstance under which I say that Kevin Feige's right. Kevin Feige is correct in saying Scarlet Witch could have defeated Thanos by herself, but only if she was channeling chaos magic in that regard, only if she was channeling that level of power. Now, you could make an argument for her being able to manipulate reality in a localized space by creating, these hexes and bending luck to her favor, but it only ever works so far. And with Thanos basically toting the totality of the Infinity Gauntlet to himself, that it probably would have countered that, right? It probably would have offset that. Now, if we're talking about the end battle of Avengers Endgame, well then yeah, because Thanos didn't have the fully assembled Infinity Gauntlet at that point, and so it never really would have worked. It would have just been Thanos with his power facing off against Scarlet Witch, and she probably would have won. But again, Feige's not wrong here. an interesting argument. It's an interesting concept in terms of who would win, who would lose, and who's more powerful than who. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. I thought I would kind of throw that out there. It's pretty interesting stuff. But yeah, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.